Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, and I'm joined by
Dominique Dennery, your co-host, and who will also be speaking in French during this presentation. Go ahead.
Excellent.
I'm here to introduce as well Janelle Scarrett, who will start us off with land acknowledgement before we go any further. Janelle, are you with us?
Okay.
Maybe little technical difficulty.
Okay, so what we will do is we'll move right on. Just before we go any further, we'd like to welcome everybody who's watching all around the world to Are You Listening? The Black Community Speaks, Politicians Listen. So thank you so much for taking your time on at least in Toronto here, a very beautiful and sunny day. I hope it is wherever you're watching this around the world. Just some introductory remarks about the UNDPAD and the federal government's commitments made to the decade. On January 30th, 2018, Canada officially adopted the International Decade for People of African Descent. Many of the people who were on that stage with the Prime Minister on Parliament Hill that day and the community leaders who worked hard to get this adoption still are here in the coalition today. Margaret Parsons, Floydine Charles Friedel, Sylvia Paris Drummond, Justice Donald McLeod, to cite just a few. This event caused many of us to pause and to be proud of the promise, or be proud of the promise of an inclusive and more equitable Canada. Dominique?
Yes, and I'm very conscious that we haven't read the land acknowledgement, and I do hope that we will get a signal when we're ready to do that and pay our respect for this land we're on. So to say that these are historic times is an understatement. We are looking at the impacts of a pandemic. Most of us have never lived something like that, and the impact on our communities, particularly. I should say I'm Haitian, and that's our community has been particularly impacted. We've got the trauma of living and dying through the George Floyd killing, the rise of protest against anti-Black racism, and the support for the Black Lives Matter movement. So we've not seen this kind of energy, and some of us have been around a long time, in over a generation. So underpinning all of this is the International Decade for People of African Descent that Dr. Vibe just spoke about. It was adopted in January 2018, which is 3 years after the decade began. And there have been a number of commitments made since, and three in particular that we'll mention for you. One of them is the commitment to collect race-based data. Without data, we can't make good policy decisions. Address inequities within the criminal justice system, and then address Black mental health now more than ever. So we will be looking at what actions can be taken to support and recognize people of African descent. We have a distinct history, culture, contribution since the 1600s. We've been in this country, and some of us have come in waves and waves of immigration, but many of us are born here and for generations. So how can we recognize this contribution? We're essential workers, we're frontline workers, delivering to the middle class services and aspiring to reach that middle class. Where's the data? Where can we show what has been progress have been made and what else we can do? So we're here to have a conversation, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Vibe, who will give us a sense of how it's going to flow moving forward. Go ahead, Dr.
Thank you,
Vibe.
Dominique. Thank you. Great, great stuff. So today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have some town hall format speakers. They're going to be coming in and sharing different aspects for about 5 minutes each. Then after that, we'll have up to about 10 participants that are giving questions in regards to the UNDPAD decade. In between that, we'll have someone come in and sort of give some commentary and give some text for what's going on in the chat room. So if you are watching on the Facebook or YouTube feed, please put in your questions and comments. We have a team monitoring that information, those texts and comments in real time. So let's have the conversation start, and I'm handing it back to my trusted colleague, Dominique.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Vibe. So this is a conversation with all of you, but we'll start with the 5 speakers that you mentioned. Alors donc, et on vous invite aussi, évidemment, si vous avez des commentaires et des questions en français, à participer pleinement dans votre langue officielle. Et nous allons regarder ces commentaires et vous laisser la parole autant que possible. Alors, nous avons pris une tradition autochtone de demander à tout le monde de parler. Donc, vous n'aurez pas des gens qui vont vous répondre. C'est vraiment l'occasion de mettre de l'avant vos préoccupations. The first speaker for the panel, so we have 5 really eminent speakers, is Floydine Charles Friedel, who is the executive director of the Caribbean African Canadian Social Services. Her first words coming on were, "I'm still standing." Floydine has been in this fight a long time and will speak to us first. And thank you very much, Floydine. We'd love to hear from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm wondering if I could take this opportunity to just do the land acknowledgement,
Yes,
please.
Please.
And so I'd like to begin by honoring the land that we're on, which has been the site of human activity since time immemorial. It is the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and most recently the Mississaugas of Credit River First Nations. These nations and the land and this land were subject to the One Dish with One Spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement to peaceably share and care for the land and its resources. Other indigenous nations and settlers, including us, are invited into this covenant in the spirit of respect, peace, and friendship. Today, Toronto, now known as Toronto, is under Treaty 13 and is home to many indigenous nations from across Turtle Island, including the Inuit and the Métis. I am mindful of broken covenants and strive to make this right with the land and with each other. We are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, immigrants, newcomers in this generation or generations past. I'd like to also acknowledge those of us who came here involuntarily, particularly as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. And so I honor and pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent. Ashe. Welcome, everyone, and we thank you for joining us on this beautiful June day on the same weekend that our neighbors to the south are celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation and Juneteenth. So it is rather fitting that we are gathered here in Canada on this time to have this collective conversation for us, by us, about us, so that you can listen and understand. We welcome those of you who are our esteemed politicians and other members of parliament and government on this day. We are here to speak specifically around the concerns and ideas that we have as it relates to who we are as African people in this land. And I would like to say, in acknowledging that the fact that we have been experiencing here in Canada anti-Black racism even before the country was named as such. So things like that we're experiencing today have been occurring for quite a long time. Many people do not even know that situations were so bad for African Canadians that many African Canadians fled to the United States to escape the conditions that they were faced as a people of African descent in this country. But today I want to speak also about the impact of the anti-Black racism on Black communities, and in particular, what the role of not-for-profits should be doing. Some may call it that we're not active enough. Some may call it indifference, but I am here to say that on today, after we have experienced the death of many people in this country, but most recently a young woman who fell 24 floors from a balcony, for those of us who experience when we go into boardrooms or into meetings to be asked, why are you here? From things like when people say to us, oh, you speak so well, as if it is so different for us, and not understanding that that in and of itself is a form of how anti-Black racism is manifested. For me, and on behalf of the organization, we do our work as a Black-led, Black-serving, and Black-mandated organization to do this work on behalf of the people whose voices may never be heard, people who are most vulnerable and who do not speak. So there's a challenge in terms of how we as not-for-profits are underfunded. We are not deemed to be at the level as mainstream. However, when there's a crisis, as we see in this pandemic, and when you see how people are responding to the George Floyd murder, it is our organizations that people look to for support, yet we do not have the resources, and whether they're human or financial, to continue on this work adequately. Governments, we are appealing to you to look to us and to understand that we come with the requisite skills and qualifications as everybody else, with an added bonus of being melanin-blessed people. So in this place, when money is being allocated, and having done the calculation, I dare say that the amount per person adds up to less than what a slave was purchased for way back when. So it is not our wish or our desire to not acknowledge the contributions you're trying to make. We're asking that you listen and understand, and listen intently to understand that a different formula, there has to be a shift, a paradigm shift, if you will, in terms of how you allocate resources and what it is that you can do to support and leverage the Black organizations across this land who are doing excellent work, but struggle day to day to pay bills, to meet all of the requirements, and to serve the populations of people that other mainstream organizations are not necessarily qualified to do, because it is not their focus. So I really want to put out a charge also to my peers that we have to collectively come forward and up the risk and start putting some demands collectively on our funders to help them understand the value that we bring to all of this work and to this country, the work that we continue to do, and all of those things. I know my time is in the next 30 seconds that I have. Just want to thank you all for the opportunity. But the challenge for me is that we now need to up the risk, and we need to put a demand on our ask and have the expected results and get a response in the same way that we deserve to, because we too are Canadians and represent the beautiful mosaic that this country has. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Floydine, for these powerful words. En français, quelques mots pour vous dire que Floydine nous a fait un appel à l'action, surtout aux communautés et aux organismes communautaires, pour dire de faire des demandes collectives aux bailleurs de fonds. Et ne venez pas seulement nous voir en période de crise, donnez-nous aussi les moyens de faire ce qu'on fait déjà et qu'on fait déjà très bien. So I'll move next to Elle. Thank you, Floydine. And Elle Jones. Elle Jones maybe doesn't need much of an introduction. She is a fierce advocate for reform, for change, transformation of the criminal justice system. So it's a real pleasure to welcome you today from Halifax, I believe. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Can everybody hear me? I'm on? Okay, I have to go really fast. I first want to thank everyone for having me on this chat, and I want to thank Floydine in particular for raising the fact of slavery in Canada, because what I'm speaking about with the prison system, the justice system, is essentially the continuation of slavery in these lands as well. You often hear us saying not just Black Lives Matter, but all Black Lives Matter. And the thrust of that statement is, of course, that until everybody's life matters, we can't just be giving benefits or recognizing a small proportion of Black people who fit into some social norms or who have the right titles or education. And in this, it is people who are being criminalized and prisoners that even as people are on the streets fighting those issues, continually get left behind. So as governments are recognizing Black people right now, I just want to say that I do not feel recognized, and I will not be recognized until we also recognize the lives of people in prison and people suffering in the justice system. And the theme of this in the 5 minutes I have would probably be the government's broken promises on justice. So the first thing I want to acknowledge very quickly is that all of these systems are connected. When we talk about the justice system, we tend to think the criminal justice system. I do want to acknowledge also the immigration system and immigration detention, which is a system of criminalizing movement. We know people are held and die in immigration detention. We don't keep those race stats, so we don't even know how many of them are Black, but we know how often it's Somalis, Nigerians, Haitians, Jamaicans who face deportation, including 118 children held in immigration detention. I know Bill C-3 is under discussion that would provide some oversight to CBSA, but the types of egregious violations that happen in the immigration system, where you're not guaranteed a lawyer, where you're not guaranteed to get a hearing, where essentially some agent is checking a box and deporting you, everybody should be ashamed that happens in this country. So I just want to put a pin in that, even as we're talking about criminal justice. But moving on to the criminal justice system, I'm sorry to go so fast. I'm trying to squeeze this information in. In Nova Scotia, these stats are unkept. I got them from a parole officer. In the Atlantic region, we make up a little over 1% of the population. So that's for the 4 provinces, but we're over 11% of the federal prison population. You see those kind of numbers across Canada for federally incarcerated people. Racism against Black people is at all levels, including from policing, so the criminalizing of people through carding, racial profiling, street checks, through to bail and the lack of access there. We have, again, extremely high numbers on remands, so we're not getting bail. Sentencing, where we're getting higher sentences. Then the disciplinary system inside the prison, which particularly as identified in Howard Saper's report called A Case Study of Diversity in Corrections, shows very clearly that when discipline systems in the prison are subjective, Black people face much higher discipline. When they're objective, Black people actually face lower discipline. And then, of course, access to parole, which Black people, again, don't keep these stats, so we don't really know. But anecdotally, it's very, very hard for Black people to get parole. And then, of course, things like breach once you're out, but can be brought back into the prison. So we recognize this is throughout the system, from policing to the courtroom to inside the prison, and then when you get out. I'm very...
ça gèle un petit peu. Go ahead.
Racial slurs, very frequently. A lot of these prisons are in white rural areas where you have like white guards coming in from a small town that are then racist towards the prisoners. Unfair discipline, as they constantly report. Involuntary transfers, very high for Black people, particularly being transferred to a few federal prisons where they collect Black people, like Collins Bay, Warkworth. Solitary confinement, which allegedly has been abolished and has not. And also the lack of any cultural or appropriate programming for Black people while they are in prison. So there is no rehabilitation. I'm going to move to solutions. I'm really trying to go fast. So I'm not here to advocate for more Black guards or wardens or for like a couple of cultural programs. I don't think that is actually what we need. The Sapers report.
Elle, your passion is freezing the screen. Elle? Just wondering if our technicians can get Elle back. I guess
okay.
Not.
Let's just see if we can get her back, and we'll get our next person on.
Yes, but it would be great if she could come. Let me spend a minute to speak to it in French. Really, yeah. I can't translate what Elle has said so beautifully, eloquently. I've heard her speak many times. Mais en gros, ce qu'elle a commencé à discuter avec nous, c'est de la criminalisation, de tout le système criminel, de la question des systèmes interconnectés. Donc, que ce soit les prisons, que ce soit à l'intérieur des prisons, que ce soit les transferts de prison, que ce soit l'accès à parole, etc. La discipline à l'intérieur des prisons qui est plus élevée aussi, qui est plus difficile pour les Noirs. Donc, elle nous disait, tant qu'on ne reconnaît pas les Noirs... Yes, I'll just finish in French. Tant qu'on ne reconnaît pas toutes les vies noires, on ne peut pas vraiment parler de justice. So, Elle, could you...
Sorry, y'all, my computer's not typing.
Yeah.
It just died for no reason.
Yes.
Quickly, I'll take 30 seconds. So, we're not just looking for programs in the prison saying that a couple of wardens are Black guards. Howard Saper's report shows that Black people have the lowest rates of recidivism in community, which shows that we can serve these sentences in community. So we need resources to build community structures where we can serve our sentences, get mental health care and treatment inside our communities. Some of the ways to make that happen, one of Trudeau's broken promises on prisons and justice was parole access, which Harper changed from the eligibility once you're up for parole from 2 years to 5 years. We need to change that back. That gets people back out on the streets. We know that only 5% of people get parole if they don't have institutional support, and you can imagine how racism impacts that. Abolish the minimum sentences. Those are unconstitutional and also largely affect the ability of judges to use their discretion to sentence people to appropriate sentences, including community. We need to review life sentences. Life sentences have been getting longer and longer and longer, and again, particularly impacts Black people who cannot get parole. So we need to really review that entire life regime. Not all is a federal responsibility, but I do want to gesture towards jury selection and also the inability to go judge only for trials on serious crimes like murder, which allows prosecutors to rely upon a racist jury to get their convictions. And we also need to review the prison disciplinary system, including access to, this is also partly provincial, like access to lawyers, legal aid. But the prison disciplinary system is what largely prevents people from both bail when they're serving in provincial and then parole in federal. And also, I want to note that this so-called new solitary regime did not abolish solitary confinement in any way, and that largely impacts Black people. So I know I went fast, but those are some of the points. Thank you. Sorry for my computer taking a vacation.
That's fine.
And for having me.
And thank you very much for those important points. Donc, c'est vraiment un appel à réformer le système, à abolir certaines choses qui ont un impact exagéré sur nos communautés et aussi à trouver des façons d'aider les gens dans leur communauté plutôt que de les transférer ailleurs. Beaucoup de choses ont été mentionnées. Avec le temps qui nous reste, merci Elle. I'm going to move to our next speaker. Alors, j'ai le plaisir de vous présenter Frank Eboa ou Frank Eboa. Alors, du COPAC. Alors, c'est le Conseil panafricain qui est responsable de développement économique et des affaires. Alors, Frank, est-ce que vous voulez bien nous donner quelques-unes de vos remarques? Vous avez 5 minutes. Là, je vais devenir plus sérieuse là, dans la gestion du temps. Allez-y. Ah, on vous entend pas.
Oui.
Parfait.
Alors j'espère que tout le monde m'entend. Donc, merci déjà pour l'invitation et merci pour l'initiative. C'est très bien, ça va faire toute une différence dans nos communautés. Alors voilà, si l'occasion nous est offerte aujourd'hui de parler, c'est important pour moi d'apporter un point de vue entrepreneurial, un point de vue économique, parce que évidemment, toutes les mesures qu'on va entendre, tout ce qu'on va demander, toutes les réclamations qui vont être faites, tout ça va tourner autour des finances. Tout ça va tourner autour d'une stratégie économique.
On vous demande de parler un tout petit peu plus fort, Franck. Vos mots sont importants et on vous entend un petit peu moins. Oui, allez-y.
Alors, est-ce qu'on m'entend mieux?
Oui, allez-y.
Oui, voilà. Donc l'objectif est simplement de rappeler au gouvernement de s'assurer que toutes les mesures ici pour renforcer les capacités des communautés noires vont être mises en place. Justement, on a déjà certaines mesures qui sont prises. Donc ici, c'est de s'assurer que cet axe économique-là, et puis bon, ce côté au point de vue de la culture entrepreneuriale va être pris en compte. Parce que si on parle des mesures pour lutter contre toute forme de discrimination, il va falloir évidemment donner des moyens aux organisations communautaires, celles qui sont justement proches des individus qui vivent ces situations. Alors, donc, il va falloir renforcer les capacités de ces organisations-là parce que, je vous prends un exemple très simple, le Conseil...
Oui, j'allais vous demander de nous donner un exemple et on nous demande aussi sur le chat de vous dire de parler un tout petit peu plus fort, Franck. Alors, okay. Donc peut-être c'est de projeter votre voix si vous pouvez. Merci.
OK. Alors, donc, l'idée ici, par exemple, pour une organisation comme le Conseil panafricain, qui a déjà une mission de s'assurer que ses membres et la communauté afro-descendante, la communauté noire, s'assurer qu'ils s'épanouissent comme il faut. et qui s'intègre comme il faut dans le système socio-économique canadien, québécois et canadien. Donc, ça a déjà cette mission. Donc, l'idée ici est de rappeler au gouvernement qu'il faut renforcer les capacités de ces organisations-là.
Alors, donc, c'est vraiment le renforcement des capacités qui est le point principal.
Bien sûr,
Vous voulez amener, d'accord.
renforcer les capacités financières et organisationnelles de toutes ces structures-là, parce qu'évidemment, il ne faut plus ici qu'on se trouve dans des situations où on est en réaction. Par exemple, avec la situation qui est arrivée avec le feu George Floyd, ici, on est toujours en réaction quand il nous arrive des choses dans la communauté. Donc, il faut qu'on ait des structures qui soient déjà prêtes, qui soient déjà organisées de telle sorte que on ne vive plus, on vive des crises différemment. Donc, au point de vue entrepreneurial et au point de vue de la représentativité des afro-descendants et des Noirs dans toute l'architecture économique canadienne, c'est important donc, de nous donner les moyens justement d'y arriver. Et puis, évidemment, il y a beaucoup de crises et beaucoup d'injustices qu'on ne va plus vivre. Donc, si on a évidemment préparé déjà toutes ces stratégies organisationnelles là bien avant, donc c'est très important. Et puis, l'idée est ici aussi d'amener le gouvernement à nous amener nous-mêmes en tant que communauté à comprendre que tout ce qui va se bâtir va d'abord se bâtir avec une solidarité qu'on va avoir entre nous. Donc, c'est important quand on planifie des stratégies pour financer les organisations ou pour financer les mesures, toutes les mesures qui vont être mises en place. C'est important que le gouvernement nous accompagne à cet élan de solidarité qu'on doit avoir envers nous-mêmes. Parce qu'on ne va pas toujours, évidemment, en tant que communauté, attendre nécessairement que le gouvernement soit là. Il y a tout un paquet de mesures qu'on peut déjà prendre entre nous-mêmes, la communauté noire, parce qu'évidemment, on a un paquet d'expertise dans nos communautés et on a un paquet de savoir dans nos communautés. Donc, il faut déjà avoir la capacité nous-mêmes d'être solidaires, d'être complètement solidaires envers nos causes, nous-mêmes, les afro-descendants, les Noirs et afro-descendants de tout le Canada. Donc, et d'avoir cette capacité de déjà être réactifs à nos causes, donc d'avoir les moyens d'être réactifs vis-à-vis de nos causes même. Et une façon moderne aujourd'hui d'accompagner cet état d'esprit-là et que le gouvernement nous accompagne dans des mesures où lorsqu'il y a une levée de fonds qu'on doit faire ou lorsqu'il y a un financement qu'on doit faire, qu'on nous demande de réunir un budget déjà entre nous et puis le gouvernement pourra accoter les moyens que nous on aura déjà pris entre nous. Donc ça veut dire que si on a un budget d'1 million qu'on veut avoir, si on se réunit déjà entre nous pour obtenir 1 million, que le gouvernement ait la capacité de dire, parce qu'on a travaillé entre nous, parce qu'on s'est réunis, le gouvernement accote ça. Donc ça va nous permettre entre nous de développer cet esprit solidaire et d'être prêts toujours dans nos causes. Donc c'est très important d'avoir cette culture-là.
Ok, je vais répéter un petit peu en anglais, répéter, mais donner un petit sommaire en anglais. Mais je vous remercie beaucoup. Je crois vous avoir entendu lors de la marche, faire un discours très
pas vraiment moi. Il y a peut-être du monde qui me ressemblait, mais c'est un événement qui était important
pour cette solidarité dont vous parlez. Exactement. Alors merci beaucoup Frank d'être venu. So in a few words, and my job, I'm not an interpreter or translator, but let me see if I can do justice to a couple of points that were made. So Frank was talking about the importance of having structures that were ready, so that when a crisis happens, when there's a crying need, that the capacities have been reinforced so that it's possible to react quickly and provide some support to businesses. The whole economic infrastructure is what he was talking about, and making sure that we're present and that we're supported. He spoke about the importance of solidarity within the Black business and Black economic sustainability movements. And then once we have our funds these are matched or amplified by the federal government. So it's very, very powerful language around what we need to do to create economic prosperity. So thank you, Frank. I'm going to go to the next speaker. I know we're going a little over time, and we want to make sure we hear from the last two speakers. And so we have Rosemarie Powell next. And Rosemarie is the Executive Director of the Toronto Community Benefits Association. So please, if you're able to come in to the studio, love to hear from you, Rosemarie.
Yeah. Hi, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation, Dominique, Dr. Vibe. It's always my pleasure to talk about community benefits. These are unprecedented times, and it's important that we have these very important conversations. So thanks for organizing this. C'est un plaisir d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. Merci pour l'invitation. Et c'est mon plaisir de parler des conventions ou ententes pour les avantages communautaires. So, for a little background for those who are not fully aware, community benefits, it's a grassroots movement by the people, for the people, to leverage jobs and opportunities for historically disadvantaged communities and equity-seeking groups. When there's major investments in infrastructure and urban development projects that are happening, and especially when there's taxpayer dollars that are being used. So the construction and maintenance industry, it represents 14% of Canada's GDP, with revenues of $250 billion being spent annually. The industry directly employs 1.4 million workers, accounting for about 7.7% of total Canadian employment. Yet it is one of the industries with the least representation of diversity, equity, and inclusion in its workforce. The industrial, commercial, and institutional sector of the construction industry, which has the bulk of government funding, is made up of approximately 90% white men. The industry overall, because of their wealth and their power, largely fueled by government spending on public infrastructure, has been successful in lobbying the government to remove any provisions for employment equity, and they don't collect race-based data. Period, because they don't want to know and they don't want to be challenged. Now, the community benefits movement acts as a counterbalance. We're taking notice of how they operate, and we're raising our voices to let government know that they cannot allow the industry to continue to regulate themselves anymore. It has not worked. They haven't made any changes to their workforce out of the goodness of their heart, and they're not going to do it. On the ground, we hear from Black and Brown people and Indigenous people and women that they have a terrible experience getting in, and they often give up. Others, they choose to work, some of them under the table and in non-unionized, unsafe work environments to put food on the table. But no matter how hard they try to pull themselves up by the bootstrap, which is what we say, right? Pull yourself up. They're trapped in a vicious cycle. And there is rampant, unchecked systemic racism and anti-Black racism that needs to be addressed in this industry. And community benefits was actually established as a counterbalance, as a way to actually raise those issues and to make sure that the construction industry is looking at incorporating policies and procedures that will deal with their workplace issues. TCBN, we work with underrepresented groups in the trades, and we have direct programming for Black youth. And when we consult with them, we've identified what these Black youth, they call the U-turn, whereby a Black youth gets an opportunity, they bust their chop on the jobs, and weeks later, months later, they're out. And they don't know why. They don't know what happened. Their supervisor doesn't like them. Maybe their peers felt that they worked too hard, and they're showing them up, or they made a complaint or something, etc. They just don't know what's happening. Those are the kinds of things that we are seeing and that we're hearing and that we need to address. And on the other side, the rub is that these same young people can't find employment in the career they love because the white-owned companies won't hire them. But there are so few minority-owned companies that they could actually turn to. Right. The only way to achieve change is through government policies embedded in the request for proposals and the contracts with the general contractors to make sure that they're hiring diversity and to make sure that they have social procurement policies so that when they subcontract that work, that they're actually identifying minority-owned businesses social enterprises and local businesses that can take on those contracts, who in turn will hire directly from those communities that are being underrepresented. And, you know, right now, the federal government is planning to spend $187 billion. Just the Canadian government alone is planning to spend $187 billion on infrastructure to fuel the economy as it looks to recover from COVID-19. And there are actually literally lobbyists from the construction industry that is putting tremendous pressure on the government to get rid of community benefits provisions on these projects. They're calling them red tape. Red tape.
One more minute, Rosemarie.
No worries, I'm wrapping up. But, you know, I just want to say, for those elected representatives who are listening right now on the call, you cannot allow for this to happen. You know, TCBN has joined with a number of community organizations, many of them who are in the PUSH Coalition and who are helping to organize this conversation here across Canada. And we have a campaign called Inclusive Recovery. Check it out. It's inclusiverecovery.ca. We have about 1,000 signatures now, and it's going to grow. It's a grassroots movement across Canada. We need your support. Sign the letter. Read up about it. We have information about community benefits projects that are happening across Canada. There's most likely a big construction project that is happening in your neighborhood right now. Don't you want to make sure that the people who live in your communities, that Black youth, that people who have been underrepresented in the industry have an opportunity, whether it be through a job or a small contract, whether it's a construction job or contracts that actually fuel the construction industry or feeds into the construction industry. So thank you for inviting me, and I really appreciated being able to present to you on community benefits today.
Okay, thank you so much, Rosemarie. I will simply say a couple of words in French to say that Rosemarie nous a parlé de la communauté, de tout ce qui touche au travail dans la construction. Alors, c'est une part importante de notre produit national brut. En ce moment, il y a un stimulus de 187 milliards de dollars qui vont être donnés à tous les projets d'infrastructure post-COVID pour justement repartir l'économie. Et dans ce contexte-là, elle parle du travail qu'elle fait pour permettre que les industries soient responsables et puissent répondre à des demandes côté social, d'inclusion et de justice sociale, si vous voulez. Elle a un groupe qui fait justement ça et qui fait des pressions, et elle demande que les gens aillent à un site web qui s'appelle www.inclusiverecovery.ca pour pouvoir, et aussi www.nextgenbuilders.ca pour soutenir surtout les jeunes qui veulent rentrer dans ce domaine et qui sont pas en mesure de progresser et d'avoir une carrière en construction. Alors sur ce, I have Richard, I'm speaking to you in French. So Richard Sharp is our next speaker. I'm looking at also the chats to see if there's anything. I believe you're next. So Richard Sharp, for those of you who don't know him, again, probably doesn't need much introduction, but is the leader of the UNDPAD PUSH Coalition. So behind this whole event that is being organized, and he will speak to us about what's important to do now and how we move forward. And so, Richard, over to you.
Thank you very much. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I might have to actually jump into the screen. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to have this opportunity to speak to everyone today. I'd like to make a little bit of a correction. I'm not the leader of the PUSH Coalition. I'm one of the lead organizers, but the PUSH Coalition comprises of many organizations and a number of people. I'm certainly not doing it by myself, and I know sometimes I'm out in front, but people like Andrea Pierce and Sharon Fletcher and and Floydine, Charles Friedel, and Sylvia Paris. Like, there's so many people that are working with us from across the country to make this work happen. First, I wanted to
corrected. I stand corrected. Okay.
The first thing I wanted to do is just to sort of situate myself within this work. And people keep asking me why we keep pushing so hard to get results for Black Canadians. And I have to say it's because this is my birthright. I was born in this country. I'm first of 6 children that were born here from Jamaican-born parents. I remember having to fight to get into my schoolyard from racist taunts of children and having to fight to get out in grade 1. I remember walking in Chatham, Ontario, down Harvey Street to Winston Churchill School with my little brother going to my grade 2 class and getting spit on by white racists in a light blue pickup truck, and have to go back home to my mom for her to clean us up and tell us to just get back out there and go to school, right? So, you know, I've watched my father, a Black man, a proud Black man, first started educated in Oxford University, completed his master's degree at Western in London, Ontario. I watched him killed, heartbroken, frustrated, angry at the fact that he could not find work as a teacher in this country. This is the manifestation of white supremacy and anti-Black racism that I know very well because I was born into this, right? So when I say that now that I'm looking at what's happening with George Floyd and the impacts that it's having across the country, but I also look at it, the impacts on my family, right? My children are watching this in slow motion. They're watching how the state bleeds the life out of a Black man. Like George Floyd, it could be me. He was my dad. And George Floyd will come again. So, you know, when I see that, it adds more fuel to the fire for us to do this work, to push for results for our people. There's no way in this world that we as Black people, having been here for almost 400 years, should be sitting back and waiting for people to do right by us. We have to work as hard as we can to make that change. I want to push now just a little bit to the historic importance of allies, because even though we're at the forefront of most of the changes that have happened in this country, be the Charter of Rights, Human Rights Commission legislation, put in place to address the issues around Black people that have benefited all of us. These allies have come around and something I've never thought that I would see in my life, with white people, thousands, supporting Black Lives Matter, talking about making changes in society so Black people can take our rightful place along with everybody else as first-class citizens. Because right now, as many of the speakers mentioned before, we are second-class citizens for all intents and purposes. Allies such as the Members of Parliament Black Caucus was predominantly a liberal stronghold, but now you got an NDP guy in there, Matthew Green, right? So there's a lot of work. They've given us a lot of space, and they've supported our initiatives from the get-go. All of the asks that I will talk to in just a few minutes speak to the need for fundamental institutional change within this country that impact the lives of Black people. I also have to talk briefly about the allies that we have within the bureaucracy. Don't get me wrong. Many of the challenges that we face as Black people have to stem from the fact that there are people who have racist, anti-Black sentiments that are within our bureaucracies. Our employees feel it, and we see it through the disproportionate and wrong-headed approach of dealing with sort of policies and programs that are directed to our people. But we have some allies in there. For the first time in a long time, people are listening to us when we're talking about addressing anti-Black racism. Deputy ministers, the clerk of the Privy Council. We now have something called a Deputy Minister Ally that is supporting us in the UN decade, a guy named Bill Matthews, a white dude who has no business under normal circumstances wanting to ally with us, but has taken up that charge. And because he wants to see change. He wants to see us access data, and our demands have been completely reasonable and within all the rules of the game. I want to talk a little bit about resilience, the resilience of our people. You know, Rosemarie talked about it, Frank talked about it, Floydine talked about it. You know, we have been here for so many years, and it almost appears that we weren't supposed to survive. But we do survive, and we're thriving. Our numbers are multiplying, are doubling every 20 years in this country. So we're now what we consider to be a force, and a force, a political force. We will be and are an economic force. People need to realize that we are connected to the continent of Africa that will take over as the most populous sort of groups of nation states. They'll take over from China in I think it's 2035, 2025, 2035, one of those numbers. I wanted to talk briefly about the importance of reporting. And so the DPAD push is really focused on let's get it out there. Let's get the information out there. Our site, our website, you know, is volunteer site, right? We are supported by Brandy Q and Nadine Spencer, who's, you know, provided us with some time. But, you know, we put information up so that we can inform the public on the activities and initiatives that we have been pushing over the last 2 years to address the decade. And those initiatives have to be are around some of the things that you know, were promised to us. As was mentioned at the start of the call, the UN Decade for People of African Descent was adopted by this country, and there were a number of commitments that were made by this government. All we are doing, in all sense of purposes, is to ask the government to follow through on those commitments. And we are here as Black communities to help that along the way. We came to the federal government with our allies, with a number of organizations. This included the Federation of Black Canadians. They were with us, right? A number of organizations with some key asks around data disaggregation, race-based data disaggregation. That was promised in January of 2018. That will be able to help us to understand what's happening to the Black community around healthcare, around employment, around policing. We also talked about having a champion for the UN Decade, someone dedicated in the Prime Minister's office or wherever that will be focused on making sure this thing happens. We also, you know, we're asking to extend the decade because we're late on getting results on these issues. Criminal justice reform, applying a Black lens to the criminal justice system in the way that we applied an Indigenous lens to understand the historic wrongs that have been imposed on our people. Many of us don't even believe that policing was really meant to serve, right? If we look back at the history of where the RCMP and the OPP came from, you know, you're either rounding up Indigenous people or you're rounding up escaped slaves or people that were didn't have their identity cards. People need to understand that identity cards is something back from the days of slavery, right? Economic measures, economic improvements, economic inclusion. Andrea Pierce and others have been working with us tirelessly to work with government to come up with solutions that would allow us to be part of the economic framework of this country. We've been excluded from opportunities. Things like procurement contracts. The majority of people are white and male, right? There are programs for Indigenous people to break into that space. There are programs for women, white women, to break into that space. We would like to see something like that put in place for Black people that would help us generationally, not handouts. There'll be a hand up to support the work that we want to see happen within our communities to bring some degree of wealth to our communities.
So 30 seconds, Richard?
Okay, I'm just about wrapping up. It'll be a bit of a long 30 seconds, though.
Okay, I can see.
So, line of sight, public service. You know, there's commitments to diversify the public service, deal with the harassment, discrimination that Blacks face. Anti-Black racism is real inside the public service as it is outside. Maintaining a line of sight on the bureaucracy when it comes to addressing that, and the needs to apply that Black lens across government programs and services going to Canadians is critically important. The last thing I'll mention is that I'm quite hopeful. I'm quite hopeful because the work that we do is nonpartisan. We've engaged with the NDP, we've engaged with the Conservatives, we've engaged with, of course, the Liberals. Greg Ferguson and the Blackhawks have given us a lot of time, right? And I think we've helped to influence some of the work that's coming out of there, and there's always the hope that we'll see some results. Matthew Green, we had him on a show the other day, and he has offered to bring us to be part of some civic engagements around addressing anti-Black racism. During the march here on June 5th, I was on a conference call in the march with my family while they were marching with Andrew Scheer and his shadow cabinet. They were talking about things about like bringing fairness to procurement. These are nonpartisan issues, nonpartisan commitments to see change, a positive change for our people. And so those kinds of results, we want to see quantified in real terms, report on them, let Canadians know, let us as Black Canadians know, so we can make choices and we can engage on how to move things forward. Last thing I will say, very last thing, in terms of the work of the Push Coalition, small but mighty team, we don't take money from government. Always be wary of these activist groups that take money from government. We are hoping that after this call, that there are people that would like to join forces with us, Black, white, brown, red, yellow, doesn't matter, to join with us in the work that we do. And to take that pledge, especially you as allies, ask us how you can help us to bring true equity to our people in this country. Thank you very much for your time. I look forward to the rest of the program.
Yes, thank you very much, Richard. I will only take a minute before we spend our last portion of the program in Dr. Vibe's good hands and say a few words in French. Donc, pour nos auditeurs francophones, c'est simplement pour vous dire en gros que Richard a parlé de façon prédominante de toute la question des rapports. Comment garder la responsabilité, s'assurer qu'il y a une responsabilité qui soit prise, c'est de faire des rapports, de garder l'œil sur ce qui se fait non seulement au niveau du système judiciaire, mais aussi des mesures économiques et de l'inclusion. Tout ce qui touche aux contrats gouvernementaux, le fait d'avoir des données pour pouvoir prendre des décisions. Il parle du travail qu'il a fait en collaboration avec les différents partis politiques. Donc, c'est pas un travail partisan, c'est un travail avec tous les partis et qui veulent continuer à avoir des gens qui les appuient. Donc, c'est un appel à vous de participer aussi à ce mouvement de la coalition pour justement s'assurer qu'on puisse faire des progrès durables. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Vine. I know
Dominique, wow.
Yes, back to you.
You made it. You were outstanding.
Well, you are outstanding, so over to you.
Well, I'd like to thank all the presenters for your passion and your power and your heart. Thank you so much for sharing. And before we get into the next section, I'd just like to say thank you for the MPs, MPPs, and trustees across this nation who are watching this live or on the replay. I know that you're getting some really good stuff out of this. So we're looking forward to continuing the great content and great sharing as we go forward. As Dominique said, I'll be overlooking or administrating the next part of our event here. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to have different representatives from the Black Canadian community posing some questions to our MPs, MPPs, and trustees, elected officials that we'd like them to think and consider and act upon. So the first person we have up is Kemba Mitchell. Ms. Michelle, I hope you are ready for us.
Hi, yes, I am. Okay, so thank you for the organizers for inviting me and our organization to speak. My name is Kemba Mitchell, and I am the chairperson of the West Island Black Community Association here in Montreal, the west end of Montreal, Quebec. And our organization, we're a charitable organization, and we serve youth, families, and seniors in the community. And my question basically is, in these times, I find it very difficult to accept the words of political leaders when they speak about that they care and that Black lives matter. Yet not one lasting thing has happened on the points that the Black community has been asking for years. So my question to the elected officials are, what can the elected leaders commit to do today to support Black businesses and nonprofits?
So Dominique? Okay. So just wanted to see if you can give a just interpretation en français.
De la question?
Yes.
Alors, well, I think we might not have the time to do that every time. And
all right, no problem. We'll move on.
Maybe the question was posed, and what I would suggest is that we're going to take as many questions as possible, is my understanding, but I'll let you see what
we'll continue on. Next person up is a lady I have worked with personally. She is very passionate, and I know that you will get every word and every ounce of her being over in the next few moments. Andrea Pierce.
Hi. I first want to thank a bunch of groups that are waiting and couldn't get on. The Bishop Barrington of the Pentecostal Assemblies that's joining us, and Pastor Gimba and his folks of the International Pastors and Leadership Forum. So my apologies that it was so full you guys couldn't get on. My question is about women entrepreneurs. I know the government funded 300 companies this year with over $30 million given to those companies. And based on our research, only 2 of those companies were Black-owned, Black-led women companies. And we see that the government is making a huge investment in women entrepreneurship. Minister Amy mentioned that there was over $2 billion in funding for women entrepreneurs, but we're not seeing any of that in the community. And so we're wondering, how does the government feel about including Black women in that, or don't we count? Because we've been keep pushing, and they have not been engaging with us on any of these things, as well as procurement opportunities for Black businesses. So that's a big deal for our community in making sure in this post-COVID recovery period that we're included. So where's the diversity and inclusion for Black women and Black businesses?
Thank you for that question. We're getting comments in the chat that you would like the questions to be translated. And so, Dr. Vibe, you were right. I was wrong. I was trying to summarize once in a while. But in this case, la question était sur les femmes entrepreneurs. Alors, de mettre l'accent sur les femmes noires en affaires, et qu'est-ce qu'on fait pour les soutenir? Alors, I'll turn it back to you, Dr. Vibe.
Thank you so much. Next person I have up is Susan Nabudwala. And I hope if I messed up your name, it's in my head, not my heart. But Susan, please join us.
Hi, Dr. Vibe. I forgive you. It's a difficult name, and I was born with it. My name is Susan Namlindwa. I am with the Afro-Canadian Chamber of Commerce here in the National Capital Region. I also do work with the Canada-Africa Chamber of Business, where we do work in Africa, and I'm the Vice President for Canada. My question is specifically about government procurement. I know that Black business community has been asking to be included since the system is full of barriers that keep us out. When are the elected federal, provincial, municipal officials we have on this line going to do something about it? This is urgent both now and post-COVID-19, sorry. This should be easy really to implement because we are not asking for money. And we believe that as citizens of this country, the government wants to include Black businesses in the supply chain and to create businesses, to create employment and grow our tax base. So this, including Black businesses in the procurement, would be a deficit fighting measure and a wealth booster to our Black communities for generations to come. My question here is, why can't a Black business win? I'm just gonna use one simple thing, like one federal cleaning contract to clean a building in Ottawa. If we are good enough to be employees, cleaning the buildings at minimum wage, surely our businesses are good enough to win these contracts. That is my question.
Okay.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much. Next up.
Let me know, Dr. Vibe, when you want me to summarize. I'll take my cue from you.
Okay, well, is it possible for that you can summarize what Susan just said there, please?
Yes, well, I won't, I'll just give a highlight. And
yes, please.
What Susan was speaking about is the government procurement process. We've heard that through, oh, je parle en anglais, oh, excusez-moi.
It's okay, you're working hard today.
L'humour est possible aussi, hein, on n'est pas parfait, mais on parlait du processus d'approvisionnement du gouvernement et elle parlait en particulier du gouvernement fédéral. Et quand Kemba Mitchell nous a parlé aussi, elle nous parlait de qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour soutenir les hommes et les femmes d'affaires noirs qui sont dans le milieu des affaires, bon, je viens de le dire, dans le milieu des affaires, mais aussi tout ce qui est le milieu à but non lucratif. Mais plus précisément, pour la dernière personne à avoir parlé, c'était ce processus d'approvisionnement. Elle parlait du fait qu'on est assez bon comme Noirs pour nettoyer les immeubles fédéraux, être des employés, mais pas pour avoir un contrat à une compagnie noire pour faire ce travail. Voilà. Monsieur Vibe, Dr. Vibe.
Thank you. You're doing fine. We got your back, Dominique. No worries. Next up, we have Dr. Helen Ofosu. Helen?
Thanks for giving me an opportunity to make a statement. It's more of a statement than a question. And many of us recognize that COVID-19 has highlighted the critical need for disaggregated race-based data, research, a mobilization hub for evaluating Black communities' risks, and contributing to much better policy design and much better outcomes. If we had something like this in place, we would have been able to respond to the catastrophic impacts of events like COVID-19 in our communities. This is absolutely needed on so many levels and across several domains. So for example, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We just can't see you, but we do hear you.
Oh, okay. I wish my video was working, but
it's okay, carry on, no problem.
I'll keep talking. Yep. So obviously it's definitely something that's needed on multiple levels and across several domains. So for example, municipal, federal, in education, advancement in the federal public service, especially in the more senior ranks. And from my perspective, as an HR consultant and career coach, I hear horror stories. The legal risks of human rights and class action suits are mounting as more and more employees find their voices. Also, people are speaking up and their allies are starting to join them. So I know we're short for time, but those are a couple of points that I wanted to make.
Okay, thank you so much, Helen, for your contribution. And what I'm going to just do now is take a little bit of a break and ask some of the questions that are showing up in the chat. I have Ju. I hope you got your first name right. And again, it's my head, not my heart. Question that he has is, do we have specific, concrete, actionable plans that we want the government to address in the short term, medium, and long term? Let's have discussions on that. We have here, Sarah from Ottawa says, we pay taxes. We deserve equal opportunity. Why should our tax dollars fund white privilege? Just quickly going through some other things here. Okay, so
I might give that one a French translation. Because it's Sarah, un commentaire très puissant, là, très fort, qui dit nous payons, nous sommes des contribuables, on paye des taxes. Alors pourquoi est-ce qu'on contribuerait à perpétuer le système de suprématie blanche?
Okay, so we've taken our little time out. We're going to continue with our other questionnaires. Next up, we have Robin Brown from Ottawa.
Hey, everybody. recently, Deputy Prime Minister Freeland and Greg Fergus said on CBC that there was a need to deal with systemic issues within government. However, time has shown again and again that these new initiatives like these get bogged down in the machinery of government, and senior management soon loses sight of them. So why not establish a UN Decade Secretariat to ensure the focus is maintained? This wouldn't require legislation, and it's relatively inexpensive. We're talking about putting something in place to institutionalize this work within the bureaucracy. Will you commit to act on this today? Words are no longer enough.
Dr. Vibe, you're on mute. Luc?
Thanks, Robin. Dominique?
Oh, okay. So I want to just say quickly that Helen had spoken to, que Hélène nous a parlé de données fondées sur avec des composantes raciales, l'importance de collecter des données qui sont divisées en fonction des critères et qui reflètent nos communautés pour qu'on puisse faire des décisions, prendre des décisions informées. Robin nous a parlé, ce serait pas compliqué et ça demande pas beaucoup de fonds d'établir un secrétariat pour la décennie pour les descendants d'origine africaine.
Thank you so much. So next up, we have God Love. Okay. God Love, are you with us? Okay. We will then go to Ms. Plushari. Are you ready for us?
I can see that we're having some issues with the capacity, right? With the numbers and who can be let into the studio. So let's see if...
So what I'm going to do is read some more of the comments on the side here. So I have here, Valerie is asking, when the government gives funding to organizations, they already know because they have been in existence for longer time or for other reasons. How do they expect that the funding is going to reach Black beneficiaries? Next up here, Rosemarie asks, yes, I agree. If we can work as cleaners, why can't we get contracts as cleaning companies?
Right.
Okay, so just
our next speaker is Sandra. Just so I was monitoring the chat for you, Dr. Vibe. I believe our next speaker is Sandra Baranchira. Yes.
Sandra should be next. So Sandra, are you available and ready for us?
I'm right here.
Thank you.
Yes,
Hello everybody. Alors, ce que je vais faire, c'est que je vais un peu vous arranger la tâche, Madame Dominique. Donc, nous avons vu ces derniers jours le Premier ministre venir s'agenouiller parmi les manifestants et d'ailleurs même indiquer que le racisme systémique, à plusieurs reprises, il l'a dit, existe bel et bien ici au Canada. Aussi, il y a quelques années, nous avons vu et nous avons entendu, au fait, à notre grand émoi, que le gouvernement du Canada acceptait la déclaration de la décennie des personnes de descendance africaine. After the previous events that we had to experience, and of course the different uproar from the Black community throughout the world, not only in North America but also in Europe and everywhere else, we would like to see more accountability and responsibility from our government. They have shown the willingness by actually making, some political declaration and etc. Now we would like to see more ownership of what they promised. What I would like to propose, it's actually to establish a national reference group that can advise the Prime Minister or the Treasury Board Secretariat Minister, Minister Duclos, on the commitments made and community feedback. We know that Minister Qualtrough just established one for people with disability for COVID-19. So this exercise should also be repeated with our communities. So for me, it's a problem and an urgency to actually address that. or and I would like to, I would be actually interested to hear what any fair-minded politician would call it. Thank you very much.
Et comment tu dirais ça en français, Sandra? National Reference Group. Quelle serait la traduction?
C'est beaucoup plus comme un pure committee, comme un comité,
Oui.
un comité de référence nationale.
Okay. Merci. Dr. Vine? Merci, Sandra.
Thank you so much. And now I think we have Godlove back. So Godlove, I am praying to God that you're back with us. Take yourself off mute, Godlove.
Yes, Dr. Vibe, I think God is listening to your prayers.
I received that.
Well, I have a comment and a question here today to my fellow Black Canadians, brothers and sisters, and not to anyone else, for a reason. I came in here today with a little bit of skepticism to say to you, my brothers and sisters, Black brothers and sisters, that you are being fooled and taken for a ride, taken for granted once again. So I appeal to you. I plead to you to just stop it already, okay? These politicians only want one thing, and it's not the one thing we know about. They only want your vote. They'll come in here, they'll take a knee, take a picture for the election brochures, and that's about it. The only way to get change is to make them pay at the election box. We're going to be doing it smartly, one riding at a time. That's how it's going to work. Your vote counts, and you better know it. Look at the demographics of our country, Canada. Check out the urban areas like in GTA, Montreal, Ottawa. Today, we shall ask you to commit to stop fooling around, okay? Now it's time to shop around. We need to galvanize our power and have the politicians recognize it at the ballot box where it hurts. One riding at a time. We must and we will make our votes count. Now, my question to my Black brothers and sisters, when are we going to wake up? You know that everything that we ask for always gets pushed to the side. You see how certain politicians are sent out at the right moment just to make us feel that we are important when we really aren't. So when are we going to start getting the things we're asking for when we meet to talk about them? So things like affordable housing, community benefits, and criterion procurement, social financing, business community hubs, and that kind of thing. When are we going to get all these things? We need them now. Thank you very much. That's my question.
Thank you, Godlove. Okay.
Donc, c'était le pouvoir du scrutin. Il ne parlait qu'à nous et pas aux politiciens en disant qu'il fallait qu'on fasse, qu'on vote et que c'est comme ça qu'on pourrait effectuer des changements. Donc, très visible. Alors, Dr. Vine?
Thank you. Next up, we have Pascal. Pascal, please join us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invite. And so far, fantastic speakers and ideas. I mean, it shows how much our community has to offer, right? So my question is going to be, you know, what is at the root of all this? Where do you begin? You know, one point that would answer all, or that would help every single question that has been asked, is that if we look at the recognition, the words of apology from the government, in Canada, everybody else has received an apology specifically from the last government. And us Black Canadians were asking for an apology. We're asking the House of Commons to recognize and to apologize for that state-sponsored systemic oppression. Where is that apology for Canada's role in the transatlantic enslavement, not a trade, and for the contemporary systemic racial discrimination? that we still face to this day, obviously. And we heard that there was a bill to move forward with an Emancipation Day. So again, our community has provided the tools. So where is that bill? Where is that ask? We're long overdue, as we've seen with all the speakers and the questions. We're long overdue. Where is the bill for Emancipation Day? Where is the bill for the apology, a formal apology from the government for enslavement, historic and contemporary to this day? It's long overdue.
Une phrase en français. Une phrase en français, Pascal.
Oui, bien sûr. En fait, c'est cette, je demande où est les excuses formelles de la part du gouvernement, parce que pour que toutes ces réponses puissent aller de l'avant, pour que le gouvernement puisse reconnaître que les torts sont historiques et que ça fait longtemps que nous, les Canadiens d'ascendance et de descendance africaine, demandons et avons même produit une demande concrète qui est au House of Commons. Nous avons produit.
Alors, où se trouve tout ça? Qu'est-ce que le gouvernement va faire?
En fait, on a bâti les outils, on a posé la question et ça fait trop longtemps qu'on attend.
On attend la réponse. Merci.
Merci.
Pascal.
Merci, Pascal. Thank you so much. And I know Dominique got a break there. So I caught that.
I know, Pascal. So
I know you got a break. Good for you. Well done. Next up, we have Paul Cherie. Please join our conversation.
Allô.
Hello.
Bonsoir à tous et merci. Bonjour, merci de m'accueillir. En fait, moi, j'ai un commentaire qui est aussi en forme de question. Voici, suite au rapport du Comité national des leaders noirs en phase avec la Charte canadienne des droits et libertés et les orientations stratégiques du gouvernement du Canada, Monsieur le ministre Trudeau alloua un fonds de 25 millions en comparaison aux 470 millions alloués aux pêcheurs et aux 100 milliards au COVID-19, afin de matérialiser les recommandations des comités respectifs. Malheureusement, et à notre grande surprise, nous apprenons que ces fonds ne seront pas disponibles au comité noir qui y travaillent depuis plusieurs années. Les problèmes à régler devront attendre 2 ans avant qu'on ne commence. Au pire, la seule priorité qui serait abordée après tout ceci est celle d'enseigner aux leaders de communautés noires comment se gouverner et mettre de l'ordre dans leurs finances. Alors, ma question est, qui prend les décisions pour nous et comment ils procèdent?
Okay. So the big question is, who's making the decisions on our behalf? How can it be that the funds are insufficient for what we need in our communities, and yet there's funds that are dispersed for many other causes and requirements, whether fishermen's, etc. So the idea there is also holding to account and asking who's making those decisions that don't support us. So.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to go back to the chat room. And Arnie is saying, perhaps we need to raise politicians from within our communities. We have able candidates that we can raise and vote from within. The Brown community has been able to do so. What is stopping us from doing so? We have numerous able individuals ready to serve. Let's see. Kingsley says, apology without reparations is useless.
Le dernier commentaire, c'est des excuses sans réparation, sans soutien financier ne servent à rien, sont complètement inutiles. Allez-y, Dr. Bach.
Thank you.
Alors, il nous reste 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes, 9 minutes left.
Well, we're going to go and just to tell people, we're going to go just a little bit over. We're going to stay as tight as we can in regards to this. So Kingsley is saying, I fully support Robin's suggestion. Any initiative that does not have leadership is destined to fail. So A lot of good stuff coming up here. Just want to know, yes, she is ready. Next up is Sharon. So Sharon, please join us.
Hi, yes, thank you so much. And again, thanks to all the great organizers. This is such a timely, important, and critical event to have, where the public and the people's voice gets heard and the politicians are listening. This is a fantastic idea. So what I wanted to say is, as someone who is in online media, which is now becoming a more powerful and resourceful source for giving information out to the public, still many people tune into mainstream media. When the government strongly supports an initiative, like back in the 80s, Participaction, there's huge campaigns to let the public be aware of the information they want to give out to the public, and showing full endorsement of not only what it is that we are jointly attacking as Canadians and how we can get there. So whether it's our health or the fight against opiates, we see the government putting a lot of backing into making sure that information goes out to the public. I have seen no awareness around the UN Decade of People of African Descent, which started in 2015 and will end very quickly in 2024. And as Richard Sharp brought out, there's a very short period of time left for many initiatives that were posed to the government to be executed and put out there. But again, if there's no awareness, then there's no accountability. So my question is, sorry about that, folks. My question is there a mechanism for reporting to the Parliament on the results of the UN Decade commitments? And my understanding is there was 42 strong recommendations requesting aggregated data was one of them amongst many. And if there is going to be a way for results to be, results for the UN Decade commitments, Black Canadians want to see these results. And so how will the public be made known that these initiatives are put forward, what they are, and those tangible results that will be impacting the quality lives for Black Canadians and essentially all Canadians?
Alors, j'y vais en français? OK. Alors, je voulais simplement dire à mes collègues qui m'écoutent en français que je ne suis pas interprète. Alors, donc, je fais une synthèse assez courte, mais donc en espérant que vous pouvez suivre aussi en regardant de nouveau l'émission. Donc, en fait, Sharon nous dit où est la sensibilisation, les grandes campagnes de sensibilisation qu'on fait pour des choses comme participation et autres, et puis quels sont les mécanismes pour faire rapport sur les résultats et laisser aux gens savoir que le gouvernement est visiblement derrière la décennie pour les descendants africains.
Thank you again, Dominique, so much. Well, as we move on rapidly, because I know we want to keep close to our time and we value everyone's time, we have her back. Elle Jones is going to be sharing some calls to action. So, Elle, here we go.
Good evening again. I just want to say very briefly before I share the call that a lot of the questions coming up from people around where can we get the money from this, that ties into criminal justice. Defund the prison, defund the police, return that money into communities where we can get mental health treatment, where we can take care of people in our communities. So very simple to meet these demands where people are saying, if we only had resources, we are resourcing punishments and not resourcing our communities. So I'm going to read this call to action because we are here for action. And I want to remind the politicians listening that these are very bare minimum demands. These are so realistic. These can be done right away. They represent the voice of the people. And coming from people who have suffered so much in this country and suffered so much through colonialism and slavery, this is really the least that can be done to support the humanity and dignity of Black people on these lands. So the first call is to join in the work to bring tangible results to Black Canadians. You can contact at the email or phone numbers, which should be on the bottom of your screen, because we can use your talents, time, and influence to help this movement. So come and help strengthen our focus on the issues mentioned or for others that should be added. So here are some of those issues, just to recap. So 1, community information and communications infrastructure. Establish with the support of a federal government a matching fund initiative, a fully resourced Black community information and communications infrastructure hub. Our voices in media are not being heard in an unfiltered way, and rapid communications and mobilizations efforts in response to national disasters response for our communities are non-existent. 2 is youth underemployment. You cannot say you value Black lives and then not value the next generation. The next is data disaggregation. For example, and here's a list: the child tax benefit, expanded seniors benefits, investments in childcare, affordable housing, and even how fast grant applications are approved for Black serving agencies versus white ones, Black intermediaries versus COVID intermediaries, for example. So again, that's to do with funding, resourcing our communities, and making sure that Black people are being seen and heard. Injustice, provide funding for programs that address anti-Black racism inside and outside the criminal justice system, and provide access to justice, and to place resources into our communities where we know we can do rehabilitation, we can do that treatment. People don't need to be in prisons for that. Address anti-Black racism across this country through adequate resourcing of programs, including things like healthcare. Resource our education, including in the arts, our culture, teaching the true history of our contributions to Canada and to world history, and mental health and its links to the unresolved and untreated trauma that so many of us have experienced due to colonialism and enslavement, addressing the microaggressions, unconscious bias that we suffer in the workplace, and truly making sure that Black people in communities have resources to heal ourselves and each other. And then in time for the next election, everybody in every region can contribute to the UNDPAD reference group in each political riding to engage in ongoing conversation with your MPs. This is active citizen engagement, and we must do this to counter institutional indifference. So get together in the next month, address all political parties, and make sure you're directly having your voice be heard. You can take the Ally Pledge in the next 30 days, and I believe that link will be posted. And again, watch the Prime Minister and Canada's adoption of the UN Decade, as well as the UN Decade for Peoples of African Descent Charter and themes, and hold them to their promises. You cannot hold a decade for people of African descent, and at the end of the decade, we are no further on or worse than we were before. So those are very, very small demands. We are not asking the moon here. This is just the voice of people across Canada. If you cannot give us that, you have to ask yourselves, do Black lives even matter? Thank you.
Dominique, enjoy that one. You're on mute, Dominique.
Sorry, the list. You saw me laugh because I'm not an interpreter. So,
you can do it high level. It's okay.
Well, we're doing our best because this is so important. So I have a list here because I do know of some of the elements that were brought forward, and we're back to things like youth and support there, to the decriminalisation. En français. Alors, on parle des jeunes, on parle de décriminaliser, on parle d'arrêter de mettre des fonds dans la punition, mais plutôt de les mettre dans la réhabilitation. On parle de prendre des actions très concrètes, comme pour les alliés. Il y a une façon de se prononcer. Il y a certains éléments qui paraissent sur votre écran et qu'on va continuer à partager avec vous. On parle d'infrastructures, de soutenir les communautés. On parle de tout ce qui touche aux bénéfices, comme pour les enfants, pour les personnes âgées, et de mettre l'investissement, il faut le mettre. Évidemment, bon, justice, on en a beaucoup parlé parce que c'est très, très important. On parle aussi d'éducation et de santé mentale. Parce que comment pouvoir soutenir les communautés noires qui ont été traumatisées et qui subissent des micro-agressions et des plus grandes agressions et qui ont besoin de soutien. Allons chercher l'argent qui est mis où il est mis maintenant pour le réallouer à nous, à notre santé, à nos causes qui nous tiennent à cœur.
Thank you, Dominique. So, as we are winding down this event, our next part of the conversation, we're going to be reading a statement of truth. I'll be reading the statement of truth in English, and then Dominique will follow up in French. So here's my go. Our significant presence and contributions on this land predate the country of Canada by over 150 years. Indeed, up until 1961, over half of all Black people in Canada were Indigenous to Canada. Indigenous settlers to Canada include your ancestors. Learn of that. Our sweat, skills, experiences, and contributions taken and used without consent are, and for free, built and shaped early Canada. Learn of that. For example, Emily Howard Stowe. She has undoubtedly pushed and carved Canada into the powerful promise that it is today. Learn of that. People of African descent are resilient, brave, spiritual, and master builders who have been central to the campaign for equality and an equitable Canada. The new goal is African Canadian truth-telling, starting today. Learn of this. Dominique?
Oui, thank you. Alors, notre présence au Canada et nos contributions importantes à notre patrie précèdent la formation du pays, le saviez-vous, de plus de 150 ans. En fait, jusqu'à 1961, plus de la moitié des Noirs vivant au Canada y étaient nés. Les pionniers du Canada incluent nos ancêtres. Sachez-le. Pour bâtir le Canada et le façonner, on a profité de nous en utilisant notre labeur, nos compétences, notre expérience et nos apports sans nous rémunérer. Sachez-le. Par exemple, donc, pensez à Mathieu Dacosta. Est-ce que la plupart d'entre vous connaissent cet interprète multilingue qui était parti des premiers bateaux d'exploration? Sans aucun doute, ce sont des gens qui ont renforcé la structure du Canada. Sachez-le. Les personnes d'ascendance africaine qui sont résilientes, braves, spirituelles et constructives ont joué un rôle critique, crucial dans la campagne prônant l'égalité et l'équité au Canada. Quel est notre nouveau but? De raconter l'histoire vraie des Afro-Canadiens dès maintenant. Sachez-le.
Fantastic, Dominique. Well, thank you so much. Well, that is the end of our event this afternoon. Got a comment here. Loved it. Thank you for this conversation, and call our elected officials and hold them accountable. So just before we officially sign off, people may be asking, why are we not having any politicians on? They were specifically asked to listen. This is for them to listen, listen, listen. So that is why you're not seeing any politicians on. I'd like to thank all the politicians, again, live on the replay, who have watched this. And call to actions. Dominique, do you have any before I give some? Do you have any calls to actions for our
reminding some of the websites, right, that people can contact. Donc, si vous voulez plus d'informations, info@undpadpush.com. Alors, c'est la même adresse en anglais et en français, évidemment. Vous avez plusieurs autres organisations. Faites la recherche, CAFCAN, BIA, il y a les BIA Média. Donc, il y a énormément de ressources disponibles.
Okay, thank you. And I will just emulate what Dominique just shared with us. Best things to do, call your representatives, whether they're municipal, provincial, federal, contact them. Action, action, action. Also, if you want more information, email info@undpadpush.com, website www.undpadpush.com. I'd like to thank some wonderful people who have made this happen. I'd like to again thank everyone in the audience, politicians and non-politicians. Thank you for taking time out of your Sunday afternoon for an important event, but it doesn't stop here. Would like to thank, and there's some people I'm going to leave out, again, my head, not my heart, Richard Sharp, Lisa Atong, BIA Media, all the presenters. Thank you so much for making this an epic event. There is more to come. And I'd like to say thank you so much. And UNDPAD, make it count, because it's not only for ourselves, it's for our future generations and also for our ancestors. Thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. God bless. Peace be well and keep the faith. Bye-bye. And thank you, Dominique, too.
Au plaisir tout le monde, merci beaucoup. On a jusqu'à 2024 avec la coalition, donc faites entendre vos voix. Merci Dr. Vibe, ce fut un plaisir de co-animer avec vous aujourd'hui. Merci à tous nos présentateurs et tous les gens qui ont posé des questions. C'est un plaisir de vous accompagner.
you.